Eyewitnesses at Buckingham Palace report an unforgettable scene. King Charles, eyes red with emotion, exiting the council chamber, whispering only 7 words. "I've signed Catherine's final ascension." What happened behind those closed doors? Why did this moment leave Britain's most powerful man in tears? This is not just a shift, it's a reckoning. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. In the early hours of a shrouded London morning, palace insiders were stunned to see security detail doubled, blinds drawn, and senior advisors summoned with a single word: emergency. What followed was a session unlike any the modern monarchy had ever witnessed. It was not merely ceremonial, it was constitutional. A high-stakes meeting where every word uttered would echo across history. Just after 4 a.m., a senior aide confirmed the impossible: a confidential order, reportedly titled the Ascension Accord, had been signed by the king himself. The content of that document, until now sealed behind royal protocol, was said to outline the final and irrevocable transfer of ceremonial power, influence, and future succession strategy, naming Catherine not just as queen consort, but as the central pillar of the monarchy's forward path. The implications sent shockwaves throughout the royal estate. The Queen's Guard was quietly repositioned. A coded directive altered security protocols across Windsor, Balmoral, and Kensington. Catherine, reportedly under armed escort, was brought to the palace just moments before dawn. Those who saw her arrive claimed her face held the stillness of someone who already knew what had transpired. It wasn't surprise, it was acceptance. And in the silence that followed, the only sound that lingered was the shutting of the council chamber doors. But it was Charles who bore the visible toll of the decision. His departure from the session was not just emotional, it was unraveling. His face streaked with grief, his movements slow, disconnected, hollow. This was not the image of a monarch basking in legacy, but of a man torn between duty and personal truth. He had signed the future into motion, but in doing so, may have closed the door on an era that bore his own name. For weeks, palace staff had whispered about a growing inner conflict, about a king battling not the world but himself. That battle, it seemed, had just reached its final blow. Yet questions still swirl in hushed tones: what led to this sudden act? Why now? And who truly orchestrated the storm behind the golden gates? Because one thing is certain, this was no isolated act of tradition. This was a culmination, a carefully timed, surgically executed transition of power, shrouded in urgency and soaked in emotion. It wasn't about replacing a queen. It was about realigning the entire monarchy around a singular figure, Catherine. And for Charles, the weight of that reality seemed to break through at the worst possible moment, after the ink had dried. But to understand why this moment mattered so deeply, we must rewind the clock to the private power plays and growing cracks that led to Catherine's unstoppable rise. She didn't shout, protest, or scheme. She watched, listened, and outmaneuvered. While headlines focused on Harry and Meghan, Catherine built an unshakable coalition inside the palace. What began as grace became strategic brilliance, and now, every move she made is coming into focus. After Queen Elizabeth's death, the royal household braced for chaos. Eyes were fixed on Charles, on Camilla, on the inevitable reshuffling of power, but few noticed the quiet recalibration happening behind closed doors. Catherine, the once considered ornamental figure of royal protocol, emerged not through proclamation but through precision. It started with timing. She remained calm when the world demanded reaction, remained silent when others spoke too loudly, and remained present when many fled from scrutiny. While others leaned into drama, Catherine leaned into diplomacy. And in the aftermath of national mourning, she became the only royal who looked like stability. Behind the scenes, a different game was unfolding. Princess Anne, the monarchy's most respected enforcer of tradition, found herself drawn to Catherine's unwavering discipline. Prince Edward, long sidelined in matters of power, recognized in Catherine a kindred sense of duty. Together, the three began to meet discreetly off-schedule gatherings, unscheduled discussions decisions that no longer needed Charles's final word. Catherine was no longer merely receiving briefings, she was crafting them. As the months progressed, whispers among palace staff turned to confessions. Aides who once served under Charles or Camilla quietly transferred their loyalty. Senior press advisors began routing their strategies through Catherine's team. Invitations for high-level diplomatic receptions started arriving with her name printed above William's. It wasn't rebellion. It was evolution. And no one could point to the exact moment it began because Catherine never declared a war, she simply replaced those who did. Her strategy thrived on restraint. When scandals erupted around Meghan's allegations, when tensions flared between Harry and William, Catherine said nothing. She let others fall into the traps of emotion while she stood unshaken. That silence wasn't passivity, it was posture. Every story about her absence from conflict became a story about her grace. Every rumor she refused to fuel became a testament to her control. And through it all, the ghost of Queen Elizabeth loomed large. Those who knew the late monarch say she saw herself in Catherine's calm, measured hands. Elizabeth had left behind more than her crown, she left behind expectations. And Catherine fulfilled them not by mimicking her, but by evolving her. The connection between the two women became more than legacy, it became leverage. In private correspondence, Catherine was said to be the only royal consistently addressed by the Queen in personal terms, not titles. By the time Charles found himself cornered by the weight of emergency decisions, Catherine had already proven herself not only capable but essential. She had built a shadow structure of loyalty, sealed with trust and cemented with silence. It wasn't just about succession, it was about survival. And for a monarchy cracking under its own contradictions, she offered something no one else could: order. Yet as Catherine rose, others began to fall, and one in particular was about to face the full weight of this changing tide. Camilla once believed her place beside the king was unquestioned, but that illusion shattered the moment the final document was signed. Sources reveal Camilla's desperate last-minute attempt to stop what she called a betrayal in the highest order. But by then, it was already too late. In the immediate aftermath of Charles's coronation, Camilla stood tall, publicly crowned, symbolically recognized, and institutionally affirmed. For a brief window, her power was real. She presided over events with regal flair, curated inner palace appointments, and was consulted on matters that once bypassed her entirely. But that momentum didn't last. Within months, Camilla's access began to narrow, and doors that were once opened for her quietly stopped swinging. Advisors who once sought her input began redirecting their loyalty elsewhere. The pivot was subtle, but devastating. Her proximity to the throne had made her feel invincible. What she hadn't seen, what she refused to see, was the quiet machinery aligning behind Catherine. Tensions inside the palace mounted. Reports began circulating of Camilla clashing with senior royals, particularly Princess Anne. The confrontation was not mild. According to insiders, Anne accused Camilla of undermining unity and acting out of self-preservation, not service. The two reportedly exchanged bitter words in the yellow drawing room just 3 days before the emergency session. That exchange, many now believe, was the final fracture that severed Camilla from the royal core. And when it came time for the most consequential decision of King Charles's reign, Camilla was nowhere to be seen, excluded, omitted, ignored. Her fury was explosive. Upon discovering the meeting had taken place without her, Camilla stormed into Charles's private chamber, demanding an explanation. He offered none. What he gave her instead, according to a senior footman, was silence and the look of a man already defeated. In a last-ditch effort, Camilla reportedly contacted constitutional advisors, questioning the legality of what she called an unauthorized realignment of power. But even that move failed to gain traction. The signature was real. The decision was final. The crown had moved on. Her departure from Windsor that night was as symbolic as it was heartbreaking. Staff observed a full royal convoy leaving under the cover of darkness. The Queen Consort's crest was removed from scheduled appearances. Her public engagements were postponed indefinitely, and in her private suite, Her personal effects were packed with chilling precision. There were no goodbyes, no public statements, only the sound of an era slipping through her hands. Camilla's fall wasn't sudden, it was strategic. It didn't come through scandal or public disgrace. It came through exclusion, silence, and the quiet erasure of relevance. The very palace she once fought to be part of had turned its back. And for a woman who had spent decades clawing her way to the top, the cold finality of being left out of the room where the future was decided broke her more than any headline ever could. But Camilla wasn't the only one caught off guard. Others had far more to lose in this royal reckoning. Not all decisions are made in daylight. For months, a select group of royals, strategists, and constitutional advisors met under a veil of secrecy. The council's mission? To safeguard the monarchy's future and remove obstacles standing in the way of Catherine's full ascension. As the public remained distracted by ceremonial appearances and tabloid noise, a clandestine operation was already in motion. The monarchy was bleeding influence, internally fractured, and hemorrhaging public trust. In private, Princess Anne warned of a reckoning approaching faster than anyone anticipated. The traditional lines of power were faltering. Charles, increasingly torn and fatigued, had become indecisive. Camilla's presence was no longer calming the institution, it was inflaming it. Something had to be done. And so, the monarchy's most calculated minds came together, not in grandeur, but in secrecy. They called themselves the Inner Council, though no official title existed. Their work would never be published, their names almost never spoken aloud, but what they orchestrated behind those locked doors at Balmoral and Sandringham may be the most consequential royal realignment in modern history. At the heart of this shadow cabinet were four figures: Anne, ever the enforcer of tradition and stability; Beatrice, a surprising addition whose intellect and discretion made her invaluable; and then, Catherine's private secretary, a woman few outside the palace even recognized, yet one who carried Catherine's trust like a weapon. Together, they began reviewing every legal statute, historic precedent, and backroom promise tied to the royal line. And buried deep within the Queen's archived papers, they discovered a clause signed, witnessed, and long forgotten that spoke of voluntary Ascension restructuring in the event of emergent public destabilization. It was Queen Elizabeth's insurance policy, a final instruction that could be activated without public vote or parliamentary delay. But what did it mean? The phrase, final ascension, was never clearly defined in royal law. For weeks, debates raged over its implications. Could it mean bypassing consort approval? Could it challenge primogeniture? Could it realign internal power toward a figure not yet monarch? Legal advisors were split. Some argued it was symbolic. Others insisted it granted the monarchy a self-corrective mechanism, a means of survival when leadership became a liability. In the end, it was Anne who pushed the council forward. "This isn't about legality," she reportedly said. "It's about inevitability." Even within the council, tensions flared. Beatrice expressed concerns over the optics. How would the public react if Charles appeared to be strong-armed? Edward, ever the diplomat, sought a softer implementation. But the facts were inescapable. Catherine was already acting as the monarchy's unofficial centre. The public saw her as the crown's future. The advisors trusted her instincts. The staff followed her lead. The only thing missing was the formal structure, and that was precisely what the council intended to deliver. Their plan was bold: initiate the clause, draft the Ascension Accord, and move swiftly to gain Charles's signature before opposition forces could organize. Everything was executed in silence. And yet, even the most carefully calculated operation could not account for the human heart. What the council planned in the shadows was powerful, but it was Charles's emotional unraveling that made the shift real. It wasn't during the signing. It wasn't during the session. It was after, alone in the corridor, that Charles broke down. What, he whispered to a stunned palace butler that morning, has now been leaked, and it may be the most vulnerable royal confession in decades. In the hours leading up to the emergency session, King Charles had been distant, detached, consumed by a weight he hadn't expected to carry so late in life. To many, it seemed like another routine moment of royal governance. But to those closest to him, the signs were clear he was spiraling. The man once so convinced of his right to reign had become haunted by the fear that his legacy would not be strength, but surrender. His mind was a battlefield, pulled violently between loyalty to his wife, Camilla, and an unshakable intuition that Catherine represented something bigger than himself, something the monarchy could no longer live without. William, unwavering and resolute, demanded clarity. Camilla, emotional and wounded, pleaded for pause. But in Charles's heart, neither voice mattered more than the deafening echo of his mother's silence. Privately, Charles was said to have revisited Diana's old journals pages he had once hidden away in a locked box, too painful to face. They were filled with doubt, with sadness, and with fragments of a woman who had long believed the crown was meant for someone far different from those who wore it. Diana had written once of Catherine, not by name, but by sentiment, a future figure of grace and endurance, who would carry the family beyond spectacle. Those words lingered with Charles as he stared down the decision he could no longer avoid. And so, in desperation, he reached out to the only man he trusted to hear the confessions he couldn't utter publicly, the Archbishop of Canterbury. According to multiple sources, Charles placed 3 separate late-night calls to the Archbishop in the week leading up to the signing. Each conversation grew more strained, more desperate, until finally, the king is said to have whispered, "I've become a prisoner of compromise." The Archbishop reportedly advised him that leadership sometimes meant surrendering pride for peace. It was not the reassurance Charles wanted, but it was the clarity he needed. And then came the moment. The ink dried, the room cleared, the storm passed, but Charles didn't return to his quarters. Instead, he lingered in the corridor outside the council chamber, motionless. A palace butler, unaware of what had just transpired, offered him water, and that's when it happened. Charles, overcome with emotion, clutched the man's arm, tears streaking his face, and whispered, "I've done what my mother never could." Those words weren't born of triumph, they were born of surrender, of heartbreak, of the searing realization that to preserve the monarchy, he had to let go of the one thing he had spent his life chasing: control. That corridor became the threshold between the past and the future. Behind him lay ghosts and regrets. Ahead of him stood a crown he would never truly hold alone, and though he carried the title of king, in that moment, Charles was simply a man grieving what was, dreading what's to come. And yet, while Charles grieved, another was preparing to fully embrace the crown she had long been destined to wear. Before the ink dried, Catherine faced 3 harrowing demands from the inner council. They would not let her ascend without proof of loyalty to the nation, to the crown, and to the people. What she said and what she promised left even Anne silent. Even after Charles's trembling signature sealed the Ascension Accord, the matter wasn't settled. Not entirely. Tradition, after all, is not so easily satisfied by ink alone. The inner council guardians of legacy and enforcers of continuity made one final request, or rather, 3. They invoked an ancient royal principle buried in palace law, the 3 pillars of royal fidelity. It was a ritual last performed in the days of Queen Mary, designed to test the soul of the one who would wield influence beyond the throne. The 3 pillars were loyalty, sacrifice, and service. If Catherine was to ascend in full, she would need to prove herself through all 3, not to the public, but to the crown itself. The first demand required her to write by her own hand a private oath. A letter, sealed, witnessed by Anne and Edward, and stored in the royal archives beside the Queen's final will. In it, Catherine reaffirmed her allegiance not to power, but to vision, to the path Elizabeth laid out before her death. It was a personal vow, quiet and sacred. Those who have seen its contents describe a single phrase repeated 3 times: "I rise not for myself, but for the nation." The second demand cut deeper. Catherine was instructed to sever ties with one member of the royal family, not out of anger, but to symbolize impartiality. She chose swiftly. Without hesitation, she removed the name of a controversial extended relative from her children's royal advisory circle. That person, once protected under royal association, would now hold no formal proximity to her influence. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty to blood could not come before loyalty to the monarchy. And then, the final act. The one that would break even the strongest heart. Catherine asked for an hour alone with her children. No aides, no security. Just a mother explaining what history now demanded of her. Sources say she returned pale, red-eyed, but steady. There was no hesitation, only resolve. When asked by Anne if she wished to delay, Catherine answered simply. Her final words to the council were recorded for posterity. She did not read them from paper, she spoke from memory. I will serve without expectation, and I will rule without fear. Not because I am ready, but because it is time. The room fell silent. No applause, no movement, just stillness, as though the very walls of the palace were listening. Anne placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder. Edward gave a subtle nod. The Ascension was no longer a matter of legality, it was alive, it was human, and it was real. But as one royal stepped into the light, others braced for exile, and a royal reshuffle unlike anything before began to unfold. Loyalty was rewarded. Dissent was crushed. Within hours of Catherine's confirmation, a wave of palace directives rewrote the power map of the monarchy. Offices were closed. Staff were dismissed. Entire bloodlines were quietly erased from the line of succession. And no one was safe. The shift was not gradual, it was surgical. The moment the Ascension was sealed, a hidden list began circulating among senior aides. It contained names, designations, ranks, and verdicts. Those loyal to the emerging order found themselves promoted, empowered, protected. Those who resisted, or had merely been slow to choose sides, were removed with chilling efficiency. What unfolded was not just a reshuffle, it was a reckoning. At the center of it all stood Catherine, no longer just a symbolic figurehead, but a force remapping the palace from the inside out. Lady Louise Windsor, once shielded from the spotlight, was elevated to a role previously reserved for senior working royals. Her poise, intellect, and unshakable discretion made her a cornerstone in Catherine's vision for a future-facing monarchy. Alongside her, Princess Charlotte was quietly positioned as the future moral compass of the crown, briefed, trained, and mentored by Princess Anne herself. Behind these promotions was a deeper message. The future belongs to those who understand both tradition and transformation. But while some rose, others were swiftly and permanently sidelined. Prince Andrew's name was stripped from all internal documents tied to royal operations. His allies, many of whom had embedded themselves in security, protocol, and estate management, were dismissed within 48 hours. Their offices cleared, access revoked, silence enforced. Camilla's personal staff met a similar fate. From senior advisors to private stylists, each one was replaced by loyalists who had served Catherine from the very beginning. No ceremony, no explanation, just closure. Beyond the palace walls, the shake-up reverberated globally. The Sussexes, already estranged from royal duties, were dealt a final blow. All remaining patronages, titles in waiting, and privileges were officially and irrevocably withdrawn. No more honorary associations, no more diplomatic functions. For Harry and Meghan, the door to return wasn't just shut, it was bolted from the inside. The message was unmistakable. There is no room for half measures in a monarchy fighting for its survival. To enforce the new direction, Edward and Anne were tasked with executing the transition at every level. Edward, with his meticulous approach, began overhauling documentation, budget allocations, and ceremonial orders. Anne, the iron spine of the monarchy, took charge of personnel, ensuring every appointment reflected unwavering loyalty to Catherine's reign. Together, they became the architects of this new royal order, one that favoured clarity over comfort and legacy over lineage. The crown had drawn a line. What was once tolerated under tradition was no longer welcome under Catherine's rule. There were no second chances, no hidden negotiations. It was a monarchy reborn in the aftermath of survival, a structure sharpened by betrayal and bolstered by resilience. But this wasn't just about titles or power, it was about legacy, and one final act sealed Catherine's irreversible destiny. At exactly 7 p.m, as bells echoed across Westminster, a sealed document was placed before the public. Its words? "We recognise Catherine by will and writ as Her Sovereign Highness and Guardian of the Realm." The monarchy hadn't seen such a title in centuries until now. For days, speculation had gripped the nation. But no one could have predicted the gravity of what was to come. The resurrection of an ancient royal title, Guardian of the Realm, signalled something far more profound than ceremonial elevation. It was a declaration of stewardship, power, and permanence. Historically used only in times of national crisis, this title had once been wielded by monarchs forced to lead in the absence of order. For it to be granted in peacetime meant only one thing. The crown had realigned its soul, and it had chosen Catherine as its living embodiment. The timing of the announcement was no accident. Anti-monarchy outlets were quietly blacked out, press briefings embargoed until the last second, and all major broadcasters synchronized to deliver a unified proclamation. And when the moment arrived, the impact was seismic. Charles's signature stood firm beneath the declaration, affixed with the royal seal, accompanied by a pre-recorded message that played only once. In times of doubt, we turn to certainty. In moments of fragility, we must choose strength. I have chosen, and I stand by that choice for the nation, for the realm, for the generations that follow. But it was not his voice that stole the moment. It was hers. Catherine, silent and composed, walked through the halls of Windsor that evening, not as a consort or future queen, but as a sovereign in all but name. Her every step was measured, purposeful. The corridors, once ruled by Elizabeth, now whispered her name. And as she emerged from behind the palace gates, the crowd, many holding their breath, erupted into spontaneous applause. Tears flowed not from shock, but from recognition. The people had already crowned her in their hearts. Now, the monarchy had done the same in law. But the most emotional moment was not broadcast. It happened in private, as Anne approached Catherine and placed something small but luminous into her hand, Queen Elizabeth's emerald brooch. Worn only on the days of greatest significance, the brooch was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of continuity, of feminine strength, and of silent authority. Anne's eyes, fierce yet glistening, said more than words ever could. The act was not mandated, it was inherited. By nightfall, the phrase "Guardian of the Realm" trended across every corner of the globe. Commentators, historians, and critics scrambled to decode what it meant for the monarchy. But for those inside the walls of the palace, the meaning was clear. Catherine had not simply stepped into a role, she had become the role. This was not a rehearsal for the crown. This was the real thing, executed with the precision of legacy and the force of destiny. But one final scene, unseen by the public, may explain why Charles cried that morning and why this moment will haunt history forever. It was tucked beneath the decree, a handwritten letter from Charles to Catherine. Never meant to be seen, it surfaced through a source close to the Queen's chamber. In it, Charles pours out his heartbreak, his hopes, and his haunting final words. "You were always meant to wear the crown. I just wasn't ready to let go." What lay on that paper was not just ink and sentiment, it was confession, absolution, and surrender. Charles, whose reign had been haunted by ghosts both public and private, finally laid bare the truth he had long buried beneath duty. The letter was written in the early hours before the emergency session, a time when he could no longer mask the war raging within him. He wrote of Diana not as the princess the world lost, but as the woman he failed. He admitted with aching clarity that her absence still lingered in every room he entered. He acknowledged Camilla, not with anger or blame, but with sorrow for the battles they both endured to stand where they were, only to find it slipping away all the same. And then came his children. He confessed his deepest wound, that in trying to hold the crown together, he may have lost them, one by one. But the heart of the letter was Catherine. Line after line, Charles reflected on her patience, her strength, and her restraint in moments where others would have demanded center stage. He called her the quiet guardian of the realm, long before the title ever reached her name. He admitted he had watched, in awe and in fear, as she gained the people's trust, not by forcing it, but by embodying it. "You've carried our family with more dignity than I ever could," he wrote. "And though my heart aches, I see it now, you were never waiting. You were preparing." The final lines shattered whatever illusion remained of a monarch clinging to pride. "Forgive me for how long it took. Forgive me for needing crisis to see what was always clear. And know this, though I step back, I do so with full heart. You were always meant to wear the crown." When Catherine read the letter, she didn't speak for hours. Those close to her said she stood at the window of her private chamber in silence, the letter pressed to her chest. There was no public reaction, no performance. But to one aide, she whispered a single word as she folded the page back into its envelope. "Thank you." This final, unseen exchange between a man surrendering history and a woman stepping into it became the unseen heartbeat of the Ascension. No cameras captured it, no ceremony acknowledged it. But in that quiet exchange of truth, pain, and reluctant blessing, the monarchy experienced something it had rarely known: healing. And so, a crown passed not just from head to head, but from heart to heart. The monarchy has been changed forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.